somewhere between the jagged peaks of the gorge and the endless savanna, where the wind carried dust instead of rain, a man found something he wasn't looking for. Corbin Thorne was walking toward his well that afternoon when he came upon her, collapsed against the timber fence. A young woman, taller than any he had ever seen, her dark hair matted with grime and blood. She wore the beaded deerskin that marked her as Apache. Her lips were cracked and white. When he offered her a dipper of water, she looked at him with eyes that held more suspicion than gratitude. But she drank. She drank 3 full dippers, and when she was finished, she rose to her feet, towering and silent, and stared at him as if memorizing his face. Then, she turned and walked into the hills without a single word. Corbin watched her disappear into the shimmering heat, thinking that was the end of it. He was wrong. Corbin Thorne had lived on this land long enough to know when something was about to break. The ranch sat in a shallow valley where the grass grew thin, and the nearest neighbor was a 2-day ride to the south. He had chosen the isolation on purpose. No questions, no trouble, just cattle, a few horses, and the kind of quiet that lets a man forget what he's left behind. He wasn't running from anything in particular, just the noise of people who thought they knew better than they did. That night, after the Apache girl had vanished into the hills, Corbin went about his work as always. He fed the horses, checked the fence line where the wood was starting to rot, and mended a hinge on a gate that had been creaking for weeks. But his mind kept returning to her. The way she had looked at him, not with fear, not with gratitude, just with a stark awareness, as if she were measuring him and had come to a decision he wasn't privy to. He told himself it didn't matter. People passed through this territory all the time. Prospectors, drifters, natives on their way to or from the trading posts farther west. She was lost, she was hurt, and now she was gone. That was all. But later that night, lying on the narrow cot in his cabin, Corbin couldn't shake the feeling that the air itself had shifted. The horses were restless. He could hear them shuffling in the corral, their hooves scraping against the hard-packed earth. Suddenly, his gelding, Bayou, let out a sharp, piercing whinny that cut through the darkness. Corbin sat up, listening. Nothing followed, just the wind sighing against the walls and the distant call of something hunting in the hills. He lay back down, staring at the rough-hewn beams of the ceiling. Tomorrow, he'd ride out to the north pasture and check the herd. Tomorrow, everything would be normal again. He was still telling himself that when the sun came up. Corbin stepped outside at first light, pulling his suspenders over his shoulders and squinting against the glare. The sky was clear, a pale blue fading to white at the edges. The valley stretched out before him, scrub brush and rock formations dotting the landscape. And then he saw them. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, shadows on the ridgeline. But shadows didn't move like that. Shadows didn't sit on horseback in perfect stillness, watching. He counted 10, then 20, and then he stopped counting. They lined the northern ridge, the eastern slope, the incline that led down to the dry creek bed in the west. Everywhere he looked, there were more of them. Apache warriors on horseback, their lances and rifles visible even from this distance. They didn't advance. They made no sound. They were simply there, encircling his ranch like a tightening noose. Corbin's hand moved instinctively toward the rifle, leaning against the doorframe. But he stopped himself. What good was one rifle against an army? He stepped into the yard, his boots crunching on the packed earth. The horses in the corral were huddled against the far fence, Their heads up, nostrils flared. They smelled it, too. Danger. Corbin scanned the ridgeline again, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. This wasn't a raid. Raiders moved fast, struck hard, and disappeared. This was something else. It was deliberate. It was a message. But what message? His throat tightened. He thought of the girl, of the water, of the way she had looked at him before she left. And then, as if summoned by the thought, a movement caught his eye. A single rider detached from the group on the northern crest and began to descend the slope, slowly, with measured control. The horse picked its way down the rocky incline with the kind of sureness only a rider born in the saddle could command. Corbin didn't move. He didn't reach for his rifle. He didn't run. He just stood there, in the middle of his yard, watching the rider approach, and wondered if this was the day his luck finally ran out. The rider stopped 50 feet away. An older man, his face a mask of weathered lines etched by years of sun, wind, and something harder. Command. He wore no war paint, but he didn't need it. Authority radiated from him like heat off stone. Behind him, more riders appeared, dozens of them, fanning out, watching. Corbin swallowed, the sound loud in the oppressive silence. And then the old warrior raised one hand, not in greeting, not in threat. He just lifted it, held it there, waiting for something Corbin couldn't name. His heart hammered against his ribs. Whatever was about to happen had been decided long before he woke up this morning. The only question was, had he saved his life yesterday? Or had he signed his death warrant? The hand remained raised. Corbin's pulse throbbed in his ears. He'd heard the stories about Apache warriors, how they could strip a man to the bone in minutes, how they fought with a ferocity that made grown soldiers weep. He'd always figured those stories were exaggerated. Now, standing in his own yard with an army watching him from every direction, he wasn't so sure. The old warrior lowered his hand slowly. Then, he dismounted. His movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial. He walked 10 paces forward and stopped, waiting. Corbin forced himself to breathe. This was a test. It had to be. If they wanted him dead, he'd be dead already. They'd had all night to burn him out or put an arrow through his window. Instead, they'd waited for the sun. They'd waited for him to see them. That meant something. He took a step forward, matching the distance. 10 paces. Then he too stopped. They stood facing each other, separated by 50 feet of dusty ground. The warrior's face was aged like old leather, his black eyes unreadable. His long hair was streaked with gray. He held no weapon in his hands, but a knife hung at his belt, and a rifle was holstered on his horse. Corbin kept his own hands visible at his sides, unthreatening. He didn't speak. He wouldn't have known what to say even if he tried. The language barrier was absolute. For a long moment, nothing happened. The warriors in the hills remained as still as stones. The horses shifted their weight. A hawk circled high overhead, oblivious to the tension below. Then, the old warrior raised his hand again, but this time he pointed not at Corbin, but at the well. Corbin's stomach lurched. The well. The water. The girl. The warrior lowered his hand and made a motion of scooping water, of drinking. The meaning was unmistakable. Corbin nodded slowly. Yes. He had given water to someone. To the girl yesterday. The warrior's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. He turned his head slightly and called out something in his own tongue. A sharp, commanding bark. A ripple of movement passed through the warriors. They parted on the eastern ridge, creating an opening, and through that opening, a single rider appeared. Corbin held his breath. It was her, the girl from yesterday. But she was transformed. Her hair was clean, braided and threaded with beads. She wore fresh deerskin and a necklace of turquoise and silver. She sat straight-backed on a painted horse. Even at this distance, her height was striking. She had to be close to 6 feet tall, perhaps more. She stood out even among the warriors. She rode down the slope with the same controlled grace as the old warrior. When she reached the valley floor, she didn't stop at a distance as he had. She rode right up to Corbin, halting just 10 feet away, close enough for him to see her face clearly. She regarded him with the same assessing gaze as before. Then she spoke. Her English was halting, but clear. "You give water." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. A fact. Corbin nodded. "I did." She glanced at the old warrior, then back to Corbin. "You not know who?" Again, not a question. Corbin shook his head. "No. You were hurt. You needed help." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or respect. She turned to the old warrior and spoke rapidly in Apache. He listened, expressionless, then replied with a single word. The girl turned back to Corbin. "My father says you are brave, or you are a fool." Corbin's throat went dry. Her father? The old warrior was her father, which meant he was the chief, which meant this girl wasn't just any Apache. She was the daughter of the man who commanded 300 warriors. "I didn't know," Corbin said, his voice quiet. "That is why you live," she replied, her tone flat, matter of fact. "Man who knows tries for reward. You give water because thirsty person needs water." "It's no different," the old warrior spoke again, longer this time. The girl listened, then translated. "My father says I make a test. To walk alone for 3 days. No food, no water. To prove I am strong. To prove I am ready." She paused. "I fell. I hit my head. I lost my way. Your water saved my life." Corbin could feel the weight of 300 pairs of eyes on him. "I'm glad you're all right." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "You are not afraid?" "I'm terrified," Corbin admitted. "But shooting or running won't change anything. So, here I stand." Something that was almost amusement touched her face. She spoke to her father again. He gave a single, sharp nod, then turned and walked back to his horse. The girl looked at Corbin one last time. "We watch. We see if you speak truth or lies. We see if you tell other white men where we are. We see if you are a good man or a bad man." "For how long?" Corbin asked. She didn't answer. She just turned her horse and rode back up the slope. The old warrior mounted and followed. Corbin stood in his yard as the sun climbed higher. The warriors did not leave. They settled into the hills, becoming part of the landscape. He was a prisoner in his own home, and he had no idea how long the sentence would be. 3 days passed. The warriors remained in the hills like sentinels carved from rock. They changed positions, but they never left. The smoke from their small fires rose in the evening sun. Corbin tried to do his chores, but everything felt wrong. He fed his horses under their watchful gaze. He mended fence posts, knowing every movement was observed. He drew water from the well, the same well where he had found her. and wondered if they were counting every bucket he drew. Sleep came in fragments. Every sound outside brought him awake with a jolt. The horses sensed his tension and grew skittish. His gelding, Bayou, kicked at the corral fence until Corbin had to move him to a separate pen. On the fourth morning, Corbin woke to find something had changed. One of the warriors had come down from the hills in the night and left something on his doorstep. A bundle wrapped in rawhide. Inside, he found dried meat and a clay jug of water. He stared at it, trying to understand the message. Were they helping him because they respected him? Or just ensuring he stayed alive long enough to complete their test? Either way, he ate the meat. It was tough and heavily salted, but it was food. His own supplies were running low, and he couldn't exactly ride to town with an army blocking every way out of the valley. By the fifth day, the isolation was getting to him. He had always preferred his solitude, but this was different. This was being watched every moment. He started talking to the horses, just to hear a voice, even if it was his own. On the sixth day, the girl returned. This time she came alone, without her father. She stopped in the same spot as before, 10 feet from where Corbin stood in the yard. "You are still here," she said. "Didn't have much of a choice," Corbin answered. She dismounted and walked closer. Up close, her height was even more impressive. She was nearly as tall as he was, and Corbin was not a small man. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent. She studied him as if she were reading a map. "You could run," she said. "In the night. Take a horse. And get myself killed before I've gone a mile. No, thank you." "You are smart," she said. It sounded like a compliment, but her tone was flat. "Most white men run. They are caught and killed. You stay. You wait. What else can I do?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the well and peered into its depths. "It is deep," she said. "Deep enough," Corbin agreed. "Doesn't run dry, even in summer." "Is that why you live here? For the good water?" "That's part of it." She turned back to him. "My people need water too. This land once belonged to us. Now the white men build fences, dig wells, and take what was free." Corbin felt the weight of her words. He had bought this land legally, according to laws written by men who never asked the Apache if they agreed. "I don't want any trouble," he said cautiously. "Trouble is already here," she replied. "The question is what you will do about it." Before Corbin could answer, a sound cut through the morning air. A single gunshot, distant but unmistakable. Then another, and a third. The girl's head snapped toward the eastern ridge. The warriors were moving, shifting their positions. More shots echoed across the valley, coming from somewhere over the hills. The girl spoke quickly in Apache, calling to the nearest warriors. One of them shouted a reply. Her expression hardened. She turned to Corbin. "White men are coming. Many guns." Corbin's blood ran cold. "How many?" 20, maybe more. They are hunting." She looked at him then, and for the first time he saw something beyond neutrality in her eyes. It might have been calculation, or it might have been accusation. "They are hunting us." The gunshots were getting closer. Whoever was out there was moving fast, and they were heading straight for the valley. In one fluid motion, the girl mounted her horse. "If they find you with us, they will kill you too. They will think you are an enemy." "Where are you going?" She didn't answer. She just kicked her horse into a gallop, riding hard for the ridge. The warriors were already falling back, melting into the hills like smoke. Corbin stood alone in his yard, as the sound of approaching horses grew louder, punctuated by the excited shouts of men. The kind of excitement that came from men who thought they had their prey cornered. He had maybe 5 minutes before they arrived. 5 minutes to decide what he would say when a posse of armed settlers found him standing in the valley that 300 Apache warriors had just abandoned. And he had absolutely no idea whose side he was supposed to be on. They came down the eastern trail like a storm breaking over the hills. Corbin counted 15 riders, with maybe more behind them. They wore the rough-spun clothes of settlers, canvas trousers, worn-out shirts, wide-brimmed hats stained with sweat and dust. Every man carried a rifle. Some had revolvers holstered at their hips. They rode hard, their faces flushed with the kind of heat that comes from a mix of excitement and anger. The lead rider spotted Corbin standing in his yard and raised a hand, slowing the group. They pulled up 30 yards from the cabin, their horses breathing hard, white foam flecking their necks. "You alone out here," the leader shouted. He was a burly man with a thick beard and eyes that swept the valley, constantly scanning for movement. "Just me," Corbin said. He kept his voice steady, his hands in plain sight. "You seen any Apache?" Another rider spurred his horse forward, this one younger, with a rifle already drawn and resting on his saddle. "We've been tracking a war party. Saw their smoke yesterday. The trail led right into this valley." Corbin's mind raced. He could lie, tell them the Apache had passed through and kept going. But these men weren't fools. They would have seen the tracks, the signs of 300 warriors preparing for a long watch. "I saw signs," Corbin said carefully. "But they're long gone." The bearded man squinted at him. "Gone where?" "North, I reckon. Heard horses moving out about 20 minutes ago." It wasn't a complete lie. The warriors had pulled back into the hills, but north was a guess, and he knew it. The young rider with the rifle looked suspicious. "Takes a lot of sand to live out here alone. Apache territory." "It's my land," Corbin said. "Bought and paid for." "Apaches don't care much for deeds and titles," the bearded man said. He dismounted and strode closer. "You're lucky they haven't scalped you already." "Maybe I'm not worth the trouble," Corbin replied. The man gave a harsh, humorless laugh. "We're a volunteer militia. We're hunting the party that raided a settlement 2 weeks south. Burned 3 homesteads, killed a family." He spat on the ground. "We aim to make them pay." Corbin's stomach tightened. "You sure it was Apache?" "Tracks don't lie," the young rider said. "A war party came through here. We followed them this far." The bearded man studied Corbin's face. "You seem mighty calm for a man who just had hostiles camped on his doorstep." "Panic doesn't help anything," Corbin said. "You hiding something?" The young rider's hand tightened on his rifle. "I'm just trying to stay alive," Corbin said. "Same as anyone." The bearded man walked past him toward the cabin. "You mind if we take a look around? Water our horses?" Corbin had little choice. "Help yourselves." The men dismounted and fanned out. Some led their horses to the trough. Others walked the perimeter of the cabin, searching for tracks, for any sign. The young rider stayed mounted, watching Corbin with open suspicion. "You got provisions in there?" the bearded man asked, nodding toward the cabin. "Enough to get by." "We could use some. We've been riding for 3 straight days. We'll pay a fair price." Corbin nodded slowly. "I'll see what I have." He walked toward the cabin, the bearded man following close behind. As they reached the door, Corbin caught a flicker of movement on the western ridge, just a flash, a shape that could have been a rock or a warrior in hiding. The Apache hadn't left. They had just pulled back, far enough to avoid a fight. They were still out there, still watching. And if this militia found them, the valley would run red. The bearded man stepped inside the cabin. Corbin followed, his mind a whirlwind of possibilities. He could tell the truth, that the Apache weren't raiders, that they had been here for days without causing harm. But would they believe him? Or would they think he'd been turned? A sympathizer. "You got coffee?" the bearded man asked, scanning the shelves. "A little," Corbin said. "Good. We'll take what you can spare." He turned to face Corbin squarely. "And you're going to tell us exactly where those Apaches went." It wasn't a request. It was an order. Corbin looked into the man's hard eyes and knew the moment had come. He could point north and send them chasing shadows. He could point west and lead them into an ambush. Or he could tell the truth and risk being killed as a traitor to his own kind. Outside, one of the men shouted, "Found fresh tracks! A lot of 'em. They ain't far." The bearded man's expression changed. His hand went to his revolver. "How long ago did they leave?" Corbin met his gaze. "Not long." The man drew his revolver and stormed out of the cabin. Corbin followed, his heart pounding. The militiamen were gathering near the east fence where the soil was soft enough to hold clear prints. Dozens of unshod horses, moving in organized patterns. "They were right here," one man said, kneeling to examine the tracks. "Looks like they've been here for days." The young rider leveled his rifle at Corbin. "You lied. They didn't just pass through. They made camp here." "I told you I saw signs," Corbin said, keeping his voice calm. "I didn't say they attacked me." "Then why the hell not?" the bearded man demanded. "You're a white settler on their land. Why would they let you live?" Corbin had one chance to play this right. One chance to stop these men from riding into the hills and starting a massacre. "Maybe because I didn't give them a reason to kill me." "You a sympathizer?" the young rider asked, his voice thick with accusation. "I sympathize with staying alive," Corbin said. "They had 300 warriors in those hills. If they wanted me dead, I'd be dead. They left me alone, so I left them alone." 300? The bearded man's face went pale. 300 Apaches had this homestead surrounded for 6 days, Corbin said, and not one of them fired a shot. The militiamen exchanged uneasy glances. The math was simple. 15 rifles against 300 warriors wasn't bravery. It was suicide. "Then why were they here?" another man asked. "War parties don't just camp for no reason." Corbin chose his words carefully. "I helped one of them. A girl. Gave her water when she was hurt. They came to see what kind of man I was." "A girl?" The young rider's eyes narrowed. "You helped a squaw?" The word made Corbin clench his jaw, but he didn't react. "I helped a person who was hurt and thirsty, same as I'd help any of you." "And they repaid you by surrounding your ranch?" The bearded man wasn't convinced. "They were watching," Corbin said, "making sure I didn't run to the nearest town and bring back the army." He gestured at the militia. "Looks like they were right to worry." The bearded man holstered his revolver, but kept his hand near it. "We've got families whose homes were burned, children who were killed. You expect us to just let that go?" "I expect you to be sure you're chasing the right people," Corbin said. "The ones who were here didn't attack anyone. They were testing me." "Testing you for what?" Before Corbin could answer, a sound echoed through the valley. A high, piercing cry. It was not human, not animal, but something in between, a signal. Every man froze. The horses shifted nervously. The cry came again, bouncing off the canyon walls, and this time it was answered. From the northern ridge, then the south, then the west, the valley filled with the sound, surrounding them. "They're still here," the young rider whispered, his rifle trembling in his hands. The bearded man scanned the ridges. There was nothing to see but rock, scrub, and shadow. But the cries continued, closer now, tightening like a noose. "Mount up," he ordered. "We're leaving, now." "We came here to fight," one man protested. "We came here to fight raiders, not 300 warriors on their own ground," the bearded man snapped, swinging into his saddle. "Let's go." The men scrambled for their horses. The young rider kept his rifle aimed at the ridges as he backed toward his mount. Within seconds, they were all mounted, their horses dancing with fear. The bearded man looked down at Corbin. "You're a fool if you stay here." "Maybe," Corbin said, "but it's still my home." "It won't be a home for long when they burn it to the ground." The man kicked his horse into motion. "Let's ride." They galloped away, heading south the way they had come. The thunder of their hooves faded quickly, swallowed by the desert wind. Corbin stood alone in his yard. The cries stopped. Silence settled over the valley like dust after a storm. Then, there was movement on the ridge. The girl appeared first, on her painted horse. Behind her, her father. Behind him, a dozen warriors. They rode down slowly, deliberately. When they reached the valley floor, the girl dismounted and walked toward Corbin. Her expression was unreadable. "You did not tell them where we were," she said. It wasn't a question. "No." "You could have," she pressed. "They would not have killed you. You could have made them happy." "I don't want anyone to be killed," Corbin said. She watched him for a long moment. Then she turned and spoke to her father in Apache. The old chief listened, then looked at Corbin with those sharp black eyes. He said something brief, curt, and final. The girl translated. "My father says the test is over. You passed." Corbin felt something in his chest loosen. Relief, maybe, or just exhaustion. "What happens now?" The girl's expression shifted. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "Now we talk." The chief dismounted and walked toward Corbin's cabin as if he owned it, not out of aggression, but with the simple bearing of a man who had spent a lifetime commanding respect without ever having to demand it. The girl followed, and Corbin brought up the rear, feeling strangely like a guest in his own home. Inside, the chief stood in the center of the small room, his eyes taking in the sparse furniture, the shelves of supplies, the single window that faced west. He said something to his daughter. "He says you live simply," she translated. "Like a warrior. No extra things." Corbin wasn't sure if it was a compliment or an observation. "I don't need much." The chief pulled a chair from the table and sat. He gestured for Corbin to do the same. The girl remained standing, positioned so she could see both men and the door. "My name," she said, formally introducing herself for the first time, "means beautiful in our tongue. The white men make jokes because I am tall, but my father says I am beautiful like a mountain, strong, tall, unshakable." "It's a good name," Corbin said. He looked toward the chief. "And your father?" "His name is not for you to speak," Najoni replied. Her tone wasn't hostile, merely factual. "He is the chief. That is enough." The chief spoke, his voice low and measured. Najoni translated in pieces. letting her father finish his thoughts before converting them to English. You gave me water when I fell. You did not ask for payment. You did not ask for favors. You did not try to touch me or keep me here. You gave me what I needed and let me go. She paused as her father continued. This is not the way of white men. They take, they demand, they hurt. But you just give. Corbin met the chief's gaze. She needed help, that's all. My father says his test was a hard one. 6 days of watching. 6 days of waiting to see if you would run to town. If you would tell the soldiers where we camped. If you would sell information for gold or safety. Najoni's voice was steady, clinical. You did none of these things. Armed men are looking for us. You could have told them, made them happy, made them think you are a good white man who helps kill the peace. I don't want to kill anyone, Corbin said. But you also do not wish to die, the chief said, his own voice cutting through the space. Najoni translated his next words. A clever man who wants to die is useless. A man who wants to live, who chooses how he lives, that is a man of value. The chief reached into a leather pouch at his belt and drew out something wrapped in cloth. He placed it on the table and slowly unwrapped it. Inside was a necklace, an intricate work of leather and beadwork with a distinct pattern. Blue and white beads arranged in a specific design. This is a symbol of protection, Najoni explained. Wear this. My people will know you are a friend. They will not harm you. They will not steal from you. You are under the protection of our tribe. Corbin stared at the necklace. I don't understand. Why? Because you showed honor when you did not have to, Najoni said. Because you risked your life to not betray us. Because my father sees something rare in you. A white man who understands the earth belongs to everyone. That water is for the thirsty. That a human being is a human being. The chief spoke again, this time at greater length, with an emphasis on certain words. Najoni listened intently before translating. My father says this land was once all Apache land. The water ran free. The animals ran free. Then the white men came with paper that said they owned what cannot be owned. They put up fences. They dug wells. They said, this is mine, that is yours. You cannot pass here. She paused. But you are different. You have a fence, you have a well. But when a person needs water, you give it. You do not ask if they are Apache or white. You do not ask if they are Christian or not. You simply give water to the thirsty. Anyone would do the same. No, Corbin said, the single word heavy with experience. No, the chief repeated in English. The word carried immense weight. He then continued in Apache, and Najoni translated. Most men would not. Most men see an Apache girl and think of danger or trouble or opportunity. You saw a thirsty person. That is the difference. The chief stood and pushed the necklace across the table toward Corbin. Take it. Wear it. You are protected. Corbin picked up the necklace. The beadwork was intricate, beautiful. The leather was soft and well worked. What does this mean for me? For my ranch? Najoni and her father exchanged a look. Then she spoke. Her own words this time. It means you can live in peace. My people will not trouble you. We will watch over your land when you are gone. If other Apache pass through, we will tell them you are a friend. She paused. But there is more. Corbin waited. Those white men will be back, she said. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. but they will come. They want to fight with the Apache. They want revenge for things they think we do. Her expression hardened. If you wear this, if they see it, they will think you are a traitor. They will not understand. They will want a war with you too. The chief spoke a final time, his words brief and definitive. My father says, choose carefully. Protection from us means danger from them. You cannot have both. Corbin held the necklace in his hands, feeling the weight of the choice. It wasn't just a piece of beaded craft. It was a declaration, a line drawn in the dust that he would have to stand on one side of. He thought of the militiamen who had just left, of the bearded man's hard eyes, of the young rider's suspicion. If they returned and found him wearing Apache symbols, they would shoot first and ask questions later. He would be marked, a traitor to his own kind. But what did that really mean? His own kind. White settlers who took land by force and called it law. Men who hunted human beings like animals and called it justice. Were they his people just because their skin was the same color? He looked at Najoni. She stood tall, waiting for his answer, with the patience of someone who had already accepted whatever choice he made. She had been dying of thirst, and he had given her water. So simple. So human. And now 300 warriors would leave him be because of it. Or he could refuse the necklace. Keep his distance. Try to remain neutral in a land where neutrality was becoming impossible. Live alone. Trust no one. And hope both sides left him in peace. That had been his plan when he came here. Isolation. Peace through distance. But the world had found him anyway, forcing his hand. Corbin lifted the necklace over his head. The beadwork settled on his chest, cool against his skin. I choose to live with honor, he said, as I have always tried to do. The chief's expression did not change, but something in his posture shifted. Respect, perhaps, or acknowledgement. He stepped forward and placed a hand briefly on Corbin's shoulder, a gesture that needed no translation. Najoni spoke to her father in Apache. He nodded and replied. She turned back to Corbin. My father says you are either brave or a fool. Perhaps both. For the first time, she almost smiled. He also says that brave, foolish men sometimes become legends. I'm not looking to be a legend, Corbin said. I just want to live in peace. Peace requires more courage than war, Najoni said. Anyone can fight. It takes a special person to choose not to when everyone else wants blood. The chief moved toward the door. Najoni followed, but paused at the threshold. You have questions, she stated. Many, Corbin admitted, but I think they can wait. Ask one, she said. While my father is here, while words still mean something, before the world becomes complicated again. Corbin thought for a moment. That test you were on, the 3 days alone, no food or water. Did you pass? Najoni's expression was unreadable. I survived. That is a kind of passing, but not in the way I planned. I fell. I needed help. Some would say that means I failed. What do you say? I say you learn more from falling than you do from standing strong, Corbin replied. Sometimes the lessons come from where you don't expect. Sometimes strength is knowing when to accept help. The chief called from outside. A summons, not harsh, but commanding. Najoni lingered at the door. My people will leave now. We go north, to the summerlands. The white men make it hard to stay anywhere for long. Always pushing, always shooting. Will you be back? Corbin asked. Perhaps if we need water. She looked at him. Or if we need to remember that not all white men are the same. She walked to her horse and mounted in one fluid motion. The chief was already on his own pony. The warriors gathered behind him. They were retreating, leaving the valley. The siege was over. The test was done. Corbin stood in his doorway and watched them go. None looked back. But as they crested a small rise, Najoni raised a hand in a gesture that might have been a farewell or an acknowledgement. Then they were gone, melting into the hills like shadows at sunset. The valley fell silent, the kind of quiet that felt alien after days of being watched. Corbin touched the necklace on his chest. The beads were warm now from his skin, no longer cool. He was protected. He was also marked. And somewhere to the south, 15 armed men were riding back to their settlement with stories of Apache warriors in these hills. Stories that would spread. Stories that would bring more men, more guns, more trouble. The peace he craved seemed further away than ever. But at least now he knew where he stood. And if men came looking for war, they would have to come through him to get it. He just hoped he had made the right choice because there was no turning back now. 3 weeks passed. The valley settled into an uneasy quiet. Corbin worked his land, tended his stock, and kept the necklace visible on his chest. He didn't hide it. He didn't take it off. If trouble was coming, he would meet it on his own terms. Trouble arrived on a Tuesday morning. Dust rising on the southern trail. Riders moving fast. Corbin counted 8 men this time, fewer than before, but armed better. The bearded militia leader was back, and he'd brought reinforcements. They rode straight to the homestead and fanned out in a semicircle around the yard, rifles ready. We heard rumors, the bearded man called out. Heard a rancher out this way has been doing business with the enemy. His eyes locked onto the necklace. Reckon the rumors were true. Corbin stood his ground. I'm not doing business with anyone. I'm living in peace. That's Injun beadwork, the young rider from before said, his voice laced with anger. You're wearing their colors. That makes you one of them. It makes me someone they won't kill, Corbin replied. Seems like a practical choice in hostile territory. It makes you a traitor, the bearded man said. He dismounted slowly, his hand near his revolver. We came here to give you a chance to explain yourself. But looking at you now, I don't think there's much to explain. Corbin felt his pulse quicken, but he kept his voice steady. You want to know why I'm wearing this? Because I gave a dying girl water, and her father happens to command 300 warriors. They tested me for 6 days. I passed. They offered me protection. I accepted. That's the whole story. And you think that makes you special? The bearded man stepped closer. You think that makes you different from the rest of us trying to survive out here? No, Corbin said. I think it makes me smart. You men came here hunting Apache. How many did you kill? The question hung in the air. None of the men answered. That's what I thought, Corbin continued. You came looking for a fight and found an army. You came back because you knew you'd lose. I made a different choice. I chose not to fight. Coward's choice, the young rider spat. Maybe, Corbin said, but I'm alive. My ranch is still standing. And I can sleep at night knowing I didn't start a war that would get good men killed on both sides. The bearded man studied him for a treng moment. You really think you can stay neutral in this? I don't think I can be neutral, Corbin said. I think I've already chosen a side. I chose the side that doesn't want bloodshed. If that makes me an enemy to you, then shoot me now and be done with it." He spread his arms wide, making himself an easy target. The necklace hung plainly on his chest, blue and white beads catching the morning sun. No one moved. The horses shifted nervously. A hawk cried overhead. Finally, the bearded man shook his head. "You're a damn fool, Thorne, but you're an honest one." He turned to his men. "Mount up. We're wasting time here." "But Jed," the young rider protested. "He ain't hurting nobody," the bearded man said, his voice final. "And if the Apache want to leave him be, that's their business. We got real trouble to handle. Settlers getting hit. Families needing protection. This man ain't one of those problems." He swung back onto his horse and looked down at Corbin one last time. "But don't expect us to come running if you need help. You made your choice." "You've made your choice." "That I have," Corbin said. This time they departed more slowly, their aggression tempered. The young rider glanced back once, his expression a mixture of anger and confusion. Then they were gone, leaving the dust to settle in the morning air. Corbin stood alone in his yard. The valley was empty once more. No warriors on the ridges, no militia on the trails, just him, his farm, and the choice he had made. He walked to the well and drew a bucket of cold, clear water, untouched by the day's coming heat. He poured it into the horse trough, watching it splash and settle. That evening, as the sun bled into the western hills, Corbin saw movement on the ridge. A single rider, sitting tall and straight in the saddle. She hadn't been a part of the posse, but had watched from a distance, ensuring he survived the confrontation. When she saw him looking, she raised a hand in acknowledgement. Then, she turned her horse and vanished into the gathering shadows. Corbin touched the locket at his chest. His choice had cost him the trust of his own people, but it had earned him something far more valuable. A genuine peace in a land where peace was as rare as summer rain. He went inside his cabin, lit a lamp against the encroaching dark, and sat down to the simple meal he'd prepared. Outside, the valley stretched silent beneath the first stars. No armies to watch for, no men to hunt. Just earth and sky, and the quiet certainty that sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is choose not to fight. His farm would stand. The water would still run for thirsty travelers who passed this way, be they Apache, white friends, or strangers. He would offer them a drink and let them go on their way. It wasn't a grand legacy, but it was an honest one. And in a territory torn apart by violence and fear, honesty was worth more than gold. Corbin Thorne had given water to a girl in need. In return, he had found something he hadn't known he was looking for. A way to live with honor in a land where honor was becoming a ghost. The choice had been simple. The consequences were hard. But he would make the same choice again. And that was enough. The doctor's office was 3 buildings down from the courthouse. Deputies escorted Caleb there, while Eleanor kept firm, steady pressure on the wound. Her own fear a cold knot in her stomach. The bullet had torn through the flesh of his shoulder, missing bone and major arteries. Painful, but not fatal, the doctor confirmed after a quick examination. "You're a lucky man," he said, cleaning and bandaging the wound. "An inch to the right, and we'd be having a very different conversation." "It's not luck," Caleb said, his eyes finding Eleanor's. "It's purpose. I had something worth protecting." Back at the courthouse, Dalton was in chains, his men disarmed and detained. The veneer of respectability he had cultivated for years was shattered. By trying to shoot Eleanor, he had proven every accusation against him. That he saw her as property to be controlled or destroyed. That he was willing to use violence to get his way. That he valued power above the law. Marshal Clayton conducted his work with efficient authority. Dalton was formally charged with attempted murder, on top of the existing charges of fraud and forgery. His lawyer, seeing how badly the tide had turned, quietly distanced himself from the case. The town officials who had once curried Dalton's favor suddenly found urgent business elsewhere. By afternoon, Caleb was bandaged and his arm was in a sling. He and Eleanor returned to the courtroom for the final proceedings. Judge Blackwood, visibly shaken by the violence that had erupted in his court, addressed the assembly. This court finds that the documents presented by Thomas Dalton concerning Eleanor Stone were fraudulent. The marriage between Caleb Stone and Eleanor Hartwell Stone is therefore lawful and legitimate. Mrs. Stone is a free citizen with all attendant rights and privileges. Furthermore, this court recognizes the broader pattern of corruption perpetrated by Mr. Dalton and orders a full investigation into all land transactions he has been involved with over the last 5 years. He looked at Eleanor with something akin to respect. Mrs. Stone, my apologies that you were subjected to this ordeal. You have conducted yourself with remarkable dignity and courage. Eleanor rose, still holding Caleb's good hand. Thank you, Your Honor. But I am not the only victim here. There are families all over this territory who lost their land and their livelihoods to Dalton's schemes. I hope justice extends to them as well. It will, Marshal Clayton assured her. We'll conduct a full review. Any family with proof of fraud or coercion should come forward. Properties taken unlawfully will be returned. In the hours that followed, the stories began to pour out. Families who had been too afraid to speak now found courage in Eleanor's example. The full extent of Dalton's corruption became clear. Dozens of homesteads had been acquired through doctored papers, intimidation, and legal manipulation. He had built an empire on the suffering of others, and now that empire was crumbling. As the sun set, Caleb and Eleanor finally left the courthouse. They were exhausted, drained by the day's events, but also profoundly relieved. It was over. Truly, finally over. Dalton was going to prison. His false claims were nullified. Their marriage was secure. Mrs. Henderson was waiting outside with the other women who had come to support them. Well, she said with satisfaction. That's that then. Now let's get you two settled. You've had enough excitement for one day. They spent the night in the capital, at a modest boarding house. The proprietor, hearing who they were and what had happened, refused to accept payment. You stood up to a tyrant, she said. That takes grit. Your money's no good here. That night, in the quiet of their rented room, Eleanor helped Caleb change his dressing. Her hands were gentle as she cleaned the wound and applied the salve the doctor had provided. You took a bullet for me, she said softly. You could have died. So could you, Caleb answered. I wasn't about to let that happen. Eleanor looked at him. This man who had won her in a poker game and given her back her life. I love you, she said, the words spoken between them for the first time. Not because you saved me, though you did. Not because you gave me a home, though you did that too. I love you because you see me. You respect me. You treat me as an equal partner in everything we do. That's rarer than gold, and more precious. Caleb reached up with his good hand and cupped her face. I love you too. You brought my life back from the dead. You made me remember what it means to hope to build, to care about tomorrow. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, even if you came to me in the strangest damn way imaginable. They kissed, a tender and profound affirmation of their vows. The violence of the day fell away. All that mattered was this: two people who had found each other against all odds, who had fought together and built something real and lasting from the wreckage of their past lives. "We go home tomorrow," Eleanor said. "Back to our mountain, our land, our life." "Home," Caleb agreed. "I like the sound of that." And for the first time since Dalton had made his move, they both slept in peace, knowing the threat was gone, and the future was theirs to shape. 6 months passed, and spring returned to the Montana mountains. The snow that had blanketed the peaks all winter began to recede, and the earth awoke with new growth. Caleb's shoulder had healed well, though it ached sometimes when the weather turned, a permanent reminder of the day he stood between violence and the woman he loved. The seeds Eleanor had planted, both literal and metaphorical, had survived the storm. They were free to grow now, nurtured by love and protected by justice. What mattered was that they would face whatever came next, together. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale from the frontier, where courage and choices shape destinies in unexpected ways. Don't forget to subscribe, and please consider leaving a super chat to help us continue bringing you more stories like these. Your support means the world to us.